So Bungie actually initiated a challenge earlier this week, stating that if we reach 7,777 likes, they would reveal the artifact mods for next season. Now, they didn't specify which mods they would actually be revealing or how many, but that goal was pretty much broken within like 10 minutes. And today they decided to present us the champion mods coming in season 15, which actually gives you a leg up right now to farm for certain weapons to be prepared for next season, which by the way will be a much longer season. Now, first, let's take a look at these mods real quick. We have for barrier only one auto rifle. Right next to it, we have unstoppable champion mods for fusion rifles and linear fusion rifles, which cost 6. Overload bow, which I know my Luminarch users right now are licking their lips. We have unstoppable pulse rifle, which is fantastic for my graviton lance and outbreak users out there, as well as unstoppable sidearm. Now, there is a lot of unstoppable champion mods, which may mean next season everything's going to be weighted more toward unstoppables. The other side of things, though, is that there is speculation that we should be getting unstoppable scorn and maybe even overload scorn. I have no idea if that's actually going to happen or not, but it sounds terrifying. Imagine an unstoppable screeb, just this big giant screeb running at you, man. Now let's talk weapons, guys, starting with exotics. I mentioned a second ago for overload, you want to use Luminarch. Luminarch, guys, has been one of the best bows when it comes to dealing with overload champions, and it's because its exotic perk, which applies that poison damage, is such a lengthy amount of time that it's applying damage over time. Thus meaning, with a single perfect draw and shot with Luminarch, you can actually stun a champion and then re-stun them in that same shot. On top of that, the AoE damage effect that it does to large groups of enemies, Luminarch is a fantastic option for overloads. Simultaneously though, you also got TQ's Divination, Trinity's Ghoul. Both of those bows are really good, especially for clearing ads. And of course, TQ can produce Warmont cells, although Warmont cells will be talked about in this week's TWAB, and yes, I see a nerf coming to them. I will say though, if you don't want to rock any of the exotic bows, any legendary bow that has an explosive head perk is fantastic for overload champions. I've got an arsenic bite. I don't use it that often, but next season we'll definitely be using it for champions. Next, I want to talk about linear fusion rifles as well as fusion rifles. I know a lot of people are bummed out that this is not going to be for overload champions, but again, if things are going to be weighted more towards unstoppable champions, this may actually be a blessing. But there's a lot of things in the exotic category that falls within the jurisdiction of this mod. First up, break out those Telestos, fellas. Considering it shoots projectiles, I'm under the assumption you can actually charge a shot up, shoot it at the ground, and when the unstoppable champion walks over those Telesto crystals, it should stun them. But even other fusion rifles, Merciless, which actually got its perks reworked or at least fixed this past season, or maybe it was last season. Someone's gonna ask, what about Bastion? I don't think anything's gonna change with Bastion. It comes with Breakthrough, where you can already stagger unstoppable champions. I don't think it's gonna do like a double stun or anything. Again, kind of similar to Devil's Ruin, where it too can also intrinsically stun unstoppable champions. There shouldn't be a double up effect here, although I've never actually sat down and tested it. Another weapon though, that is also a fusion rifle is Vex Mythoclast. Yes, next season, you might actually see Vex Mythoclast become part of the in-game PvE meta. It'll need some reworks, of course. And again, stated in the Fireteam Chat podcast a few months ago, Vex Mythoclast is supposed to be getting a buff at some point. So fellas, if you have not gotten the exotic catalyst, now might be the time. Now, another weapon that falls within this category is another fusion rifle, 1000 Voices. Yes, this is a fusion rifle, despite a lot of people thinking it's a linear fusion. Regardless, whether it was a linear fusion or fusion, this mod is still gonna work for it. On top of weapons like Sleeper Simulant, which is a linear fusion rifle, Queenbreaker's Bow, which a lot of people don't even use, understandably so. And in the kinetic slot, you do have Arbalest, which you can utilize with unstoppable champions. And again, Arbalest is doing much better this season with the linear fusion rifle buff. Outside of that, guys, we do have a number of legendary options. You've got Null Composure, Plug 1. I even landed this Adept Exile's Curse with Vorpal. And there are other fusion rifles out there that can roll with Vorpal, but these fusion rifles will do just fine against unstoppable champions, as well as just doing damage. One of the best metas inside of Vaulted Glass is actually fusion rifles on Atheon. Fellas, it does a hell of a lot of damage. Outside of that, though, you do have linear fusion rifles like the Threaded Needle, which can, of course, roll with Vorpal and auto-loading for running and gunning. Again, hopefully next season is going to be just a ton of unstoppable champions to take advantage of the large amount of unstoppable champion mods that are given to us, which takes us to auto rifles. Now, auto rifles is yet again the barrier mod for this season. And like every season, when it comes to dealing with barrier champions, disruption break on any weapon you can find is always a great option to go with. That debuff that you apply to barrier champions when you break their barrier allows for easy cleanup for your kinetic weapons. I've got a shadow price here with disruption break. And again, to do even more damage to barrier champions, armor piercing rounds also does increase damage. But even if you look in our kinetic slot, you've got Chroma Rush that's dropping this season. That's fantastic. Tiger Spike, which just got repriced rolls. We just reviewed it the other day, as well as a number of other energy options. As far as exotics go though, we really can't say much about that because we do know there's supposed to be a number of exotic weapon buffs targeted at exotic primaries that will be revealed to us next week. Will Sweet Business be the PvE meta? Maybe. Actually, that would work out so well considering the rally barricade buff that's coming. That in combination with Sweet Business. Oh, outside of that, guys, there is one other auto rifle I want to bring up, which we definitely overlook a bunch here, and it's my fault. And that's actually 7th Seraph Carbine. This is such a meta auto rifle inside of PvE. Look at this. Vorpal, 4 times the charm, armor piercing rounds, and it's in the kinetic slot. One of the best weapons I own for taking down barrier champions. Again, my goal with this video is for you to dig through your vault and make sure, because a lot of us are deleting weapons going into the next season to free up room in our vaults. If you're seeing these champion mods, think before you delete, because you may need them next season. Now, circling back around to pulse rifles, which will also have unstoppable rounds, as well as sidearms. However, the pulse rifles that really jump out to me is, of course, Graviton Lance, Outbreak Perfected, Bad Juju, No Time to Explain. Although, No Time to Explain, I have not confirmed this or not, but does the Portal Buddy stun champions? I don't think it would, right? Like, surely not. If it did. Oh, outside of that, I do have a couple of legendary pulse rifles I really like. One of them being Stars and Shadow, which does solar damage, and it can roll with things like Vorpal. You also have options like the Messenger. And even if you don't even have the adept version of the Messenger, having a one-for-all roll, or even a Desperado roll, is still really nice. As well as Time-Worn Spire, which is present in the kinetic slot. It too has Vorpal on it, as well as a number of other traits like Rampage Subsistence that make it a good option inside of PvE. Again, there's a ton of options. I would just comb through all your pulse rifles and just see which ones are your most standout rolls. Which takes us to sidearms, which is also going to be dealing with unstoppable champions. Again, so much here for unstoppables. We also have unstoppable sidearms this season. However, I have not really been using unstoppable sidearms. And that's simply because we've had unstoppable grenade launchers, which has been paired very nicely with Breach and Clear this past season. But we won't have that next season, which is why you may want to consider Cryosthesia, which not only will be able to stun, but also freeze your targets. And depending on what you're utilizing in your stasis build, if you'll be using that, that can go hand in hand with Cryosthesia. On top of that, things like Traveler's Chosen is very nice for your neutral game abilities. Devil's Ruin, which already has the intrinsic ability to stun unstoppable champions. On top of that, its exotic perk really allows this sidearm to perform outside of sidearm range, which is kind of what holds back sidearms for me. You have to be so close to your enemy, and in things like Grandmaster Nightfalls, that can be very dangerous outside of the Yeet method. So guys, that is our breakdown of the artifact mods. Again, these are just the barrier champion artifact mods. Somebody brought up that we only got 5 mods, and shouldn't we be getting 6? Because normally the first column is all of our low cost mods for our primary weapons, and then in the 4th or 5th column do we see mods for our special weapons, and in this case linear fusion rifles and fusion rifles. Bungie actually followed up after this tweet with this comment right here. Oh, did we forget one? They say the pin is mightier, but in this case we got overloaded. See you on August the 24th. Fellas, the indication is clear. Overload swords are coming next season, which means the will continue, or at least on some levels. Granted, would I rather just keep energy accelerant? Hell yeah. But at the same time, I'm still gonna try to make Crown Splitter and this Vorpal roll work. Some questions are gonna come up. What about Lament? It already bypasses barriers and deals with barrier champions. Will it be able to do both? Normally not the case. Similar to Ariana's Vow, say if there was a season with unstoppable hand cannon, that wouldn't work with Ariana's. Ariana would just work against barrier champions. Any of these exotics that have intrinsic abilities toward champions pretty much stays locked to those champions. However, we'll see. Other swords I want you to consider though for dealing with overload champions, especially if you want to just sit back and play it safe, is of course these caster frame swords. Think Solar Scar, which by the way can roll with chain reaction, and yes, it does solar damage and produces Warmind cells. There's also Temptation's Hook, which even goes goes an extra level by rolling with Vorpal. Of course, a lot of people don't like caster frame because of the large amount of ammo that they consume, which I actually hope Bungie addresses in a TWAB either this week or next week. Other swords that are very good though, it's still your vortex frame swords. Think Falling Guillotine. You can even get Quick Fang with One for All, which you can imagine just running into a group of enemies, hitting some quick melees off on them, proccing One for All with that 35% buff. And I would probably actually do like an invis loadout with this, paired with Lucent Blade. So guys, those are your champion mods for next season. Again, the whole idea with a video like this is just allow you to comb through your vault and go ahead and start tracking down weapons that you're going to be using next season. I like to know what to keep, although we try to keep everything. Fingers crossed that between now and the announcement at the end of the month, Bungie says something about vault space, because you never know, season to season, what might be meta. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.